Okay, I have 6:30, and we'll try to be mindful of everybody's time. Well, first off, I want to thank you for being here tonight for our bond referendum information meeting. When you came in or when you were seated, if you look at your table, there's some little cards there, and we would ask you if you have a question that comes up during the presentation, or maybe you already have something in mind that you would like answered, jot those down. At the conclusion of the presentation, we're going to look at those questions and respond so that everybody can hear the question and know what the answer is. We will do our best to answer your questions. If for some reason we're unable to answer a question, we'll get the answer in time. All of what's going on tonight will end up on our bond page on our website, 2021 bond information page. I think that may be the title. But it's very important that we give you guys the information. So, my name is James Sanders, and I'm the superintendent. Many of you I know, and I just want to thank you for being here. We're recording this, and it will be posted on our website. We looked at trying to stream it. I had a couple folks ask about streaming. Sometimes we have good success, sometimes we don't. And so we were reluctant to do that because it is a very important meeting, but our goal is to get this up as quick as we can. Probably, Lord willing, it'll be up tomorrow sometime, and we'll be ready to go there. And I talked to you a little bit about the questions already. As you move along, if you have a question, we have different folks that work for the school district in the room. If y'all just kind of be mindful, that somebody has a question card or something, and they'll pick those up from you. Okay, so let's get started. We're going to start out with answering the question, how did we arrive here? So obviously we have a bond call for November the 2nd, a bond referendum. And you can see early voting, it starts October 18th and it runs through the 29th. And so everybody who's eligible to vote, and the last day to register, I believe, is October 4th. So if you're not registered, you have folks that need to remind of that. They need to get that done. And so you can go to our website. Also, I think you can go to votetexas.gov, and there's information there that will help you. So how did we arrive here? So in the summer of 2019, the school district initiated a process that engaged we had two different committees that were formed, but we've engaged over 100 school community members during that time that included our students, our parents, business owners, school employees, and our board members. Over a period of those 2 years, we had two committees, and they conducted meetings, and they formed recommendations and made those recommendations. As I look around the room, I think some of you have served on some of those committees. We had a collaborative visioning committee that was formed. Come on in, folks. We had a facility planning committee that was formed as a result of those collaborative meetings. So, what did the CVC or the Collaborative Vision Committee recommend? They recommended measures and actions for us to consider, for the district to consider. These eventually made it to our Board of Trustees for consideration. These are not mandates from the CVC. The CVC can't mandate anything. They were just they were asked to look at these things. So one was to provide classrooms and facilities that meet square footage requirements for students. Okay? Bottom line, just a very short, simple answer is to make sure we have room for our kids in the classrooms and that it is an adequate space. The second measure was to maintain an appropriate student-to-teacher ratio for classroom instruction. This is not PE necessarily. This is not band. It's not those things where the kids go out and expect large classes. These are primarily affect pre-K through grade 5. It's when kids hit 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, they begin to change classes, right? They get offerings that they can go to. But in those early grades particularly, they're in the same room pretty much all day long with the teacher. They may go out for specials one day or part of the day, go to recess. One day they may go to PE, depending upon the way the programs are set up. They may go to art class or music. And so those were the two measures that were recommended to consider. There were also action steps. One was to create a facility planning committee. which was the second committee I mentioned previously. The facility committee was asked to conduct a facility needs assessment to prioritize needs based on the committee's recommendations, develop a budget analysis based on the needs assessment, come up with a plan, and present the plans to the Board of Trustees. That was approved in 2019. So that was a long time ago. These processes are slow and they're very deliberate. And of course, we've had a lot of obstacles in our way since 2019 that many people are all aware of, right? So in 2019, some other things that were going on. The district approved a Chapter 313 tax limitation agreement that led to the solar battery project that's out here on, I think, 1390, maybe 4092 right in there. I haven't been over there lately, but you know, it kind of reminds me of an airport being built. Just if you ever look at an aerial view of that thing, it has a large footprint. It's actually on Google Maps now, and you can see it. I encourage you sometime to look at that. The taxable value for the solar battery company should begin to be added into the tax base next year. The added tax value should impact the school district's tax rate favorably. We'll talk a little bit about that later on. Some other things that took place during this time period, the district recommended and it was approved that we hire a lawyer to work with us on contracts and ensuring that we were following all the legal policies that are required when you're spending taxpayer dollars. And then the district also recommended, and Goodwin Lasker Strong, sometimes they're referred to as GLS, they were approved to assist us in our facility construction projects. Gallagher Construction was approved to serve alongside the district leadership team in managing facility construction projects. So there's if you go to build a project in a school district, there's different ways you can do it. They're outlined in the board policy and state law. Very strict, very precise, and our district has chosen to use what's called a construction manager agent process. And what we like about that is the construction manager sits at the table with us. So so let's say we have a facility committee, let's say we have, or it could be the Board of Trustees in some cases, eventually if we get to them. Well, sitting at the table with all of us is our construction manager agent. He is working for us. He is not trying to, get change orders or do different things to try to increase his share of the revenue. His share of the revenue is established right up front in the contract. And so, in some ways, he can work in opposite direction of even the architect. The architect prepares a design, and the construction manager agent works with the district in engaging the companies for bids, trying to determine what's the best value for the district, and then just moving along, possibly, hey, we've done this over here, I've known schools that have done this over here, and this is what the design calls for, but if we do that, we may be able to save a little money, or we may be able to turn around and put that money over here and make this part better than it was going to be. And so a lot of schools use that, and it works well. And that's the process that we'll be using on this project going forward. So eventually, this led to a recommendation being made to the Board of Trustees in August of this year. School boards cannot, make decisions about whether or not bonds are passed. All they can do is raise awareness to the community. I had one board member ask me one time, so is there some way we can know if the board is for it or if the community is for it? I said, yes, there's a legal process for it. You call for a referendum, community gets engaged, they try to find out, they decide, is this good, is this bad, is this what we need, and then they vote. And that's the purpose. And so a lot of folks don't understand that, but there's a little copy of the ballot there. You can see that, that's on our webpage. And then the last few sentences, that's just from some policies, excerpts from policies that kind of basically say what I said. Okay, so what were some of the findings? Remember we talked about the two measures, right? One of the measures was the student to teacher ratio for kindergarten to 5th grade. Remember I outlined and said for lower grades, the core classes, and the size in regard to the teacher and the student matter. It's very well known that good student-to-teacher ratios enhance learning. On the other side, you pack too many kids in a room, maybe we have a room this size, and we put 35 first graders in it with one teacher, the room's not going to help us, right? It's hard, if you've ever tried to deal with 35, it's hard to deal with 35 first graders on the playground, let alone in the classroom. So I say that as an exaggerated, anecdotal kind of story. It matters what size. Our district, our collaborative vision committee looked at that. All those folks that were on that committee, and they determined that the best ratio for us would be 17-1. Now, does that mean that what happens if we have 18-1 or 19-1? You know, if somebody knocks on the door tomorrow, they come to school, we put them in the class. But that is the situation here. So at this time, in grades K through 5, right? Pre-K through 3 are at the elementary, but grades 4 and 5 are at the middle school. But at this time, from the standpoint of student to teacher classroom ratio, how many kids are with the teacher? We're exceeding that self-imposed 17-1 ratio that our district has decided is the way we need to go, that offers the best model for instruction. And as a result of that, this is one of the challenges which hence led to where we are today with the bond referendum. To accommodate future growth, we're going to have to hire new teachers for those grades. So if we need a 5th teacher, because we have so many kids in those 4, we basically have 4 teachers for every grade, okay? That's relative. I think pre-K we have 3, and that's just because we went to full-day pre-K a year or so ago. And that's a long one, but in those other grades, K through 5, we have 4 teachers. Again, when you get to the upper grades, 6th grade, probably similar. They do go out part of the time during the day. But when you get a kid in 7th grade, they're not all in English this period or math that period. They're moving over to band. They're moving over to athletics. You know, they're moving to lots of different electives. Most of you have kids, and if you have any that are in that range or older, you know what I'm talking about. So it's easier to accommodate more kids as they get older because of the program offerings in the school district. But in this case, we have 4 teachers for pretty much every section, okay, for every grade. Problem is, when we exceed that 17-1, which we're there now, and we need that 5th teacher at some point, we don't have a place to put them. We don't have a room to put them in. Okay, so that's part of the dilemma that we were faced with. In 2021, TDA, they look every 3 years at school districts, and they determine from a 3-year snapshot looking back, they determine what they call fast growth districts. Scurry-Rosser, the last 3 years, has been considered a fast growth district, growing at a rate of about 6.8%. And so that is what it is. And I always say it this way: we're going to teach whoever comes. We'll figure it out. That's what we do. We'll make it work. But those are the facts. So in regard to the elementary, as far as square footage, that was the other measure, right? To ensure that we had adequate space for our children. That was one of the measures that came out of the studies that we did with our committees. Let's see. I think that says it opened in 1987, and over the years it's been used to serve different grade levels. Currently it's serving pre-K to 3. And I apologize, those words are probably, well, they're larger for y'all, aren't they? Good. And so you can see, I talked about capacity. Based on square footage, that building is considered full when there's 293 students in it. And it just so happens, coincidentally, I looked at the enrollment again today. The enrollment at the elementary right now is 293. So the elementary is full, y'all. All right? We're making do. But if we're growing, and we're going to grow, we need to start thinking about what we're going to do. And so, I can't do anything about that. All I can do is raise the awareness. So we're raising the awareness to our community. And you can see also square footage for students. And this, by the way, all of this will be on our website. Feel free to jot it down or to take pictures, but it will be on our website. And if you can't find it, I'll send it to you. Just send me an email or call me. So there, almost every room in the elementary is 615 square feet. Okay. For pre-K to first grade, the TEA recommendation is 800. As kids get older, you think, well, they're getting bigger, they need more room. It's actually the opposite as far as standards are concerned. Second grade to fifth grade, they need 700 square feet. But the reality is we don't have that currently at the elementary campus. I don't know what the standard was when it was built. I imagine it was less, because they probably had to build it to standard. But the standards changed again this summer. I hadn't looked at them. Steve, I don't know if you have yet. I was at a training session the other day that was talking about, hey, there's new TEA standards coming out. That dadgummit, you know, we love our politicians, right? But every 2 years they start doing stuff to us. So looks like we've got other things to look at there. But so a fact, and I'm going to look on the screen to make sure I can see it. Currently, our classrooms at the elementary, they're not providing adequate space, and the school is full. So as the two measures from the Collaborative Visioning Committee are applied to that campus, we don't meet up to the standard. That is a fact. It is what it is. I mentioned to you already, just in summary, these are some other needs that we may have not talked about. In the elementary classrooms, as I go around and talk to the teachers and I go, what do you need in your room? What do you need? And they say storage. They need storage in their room. We don't have that. Very few of those elementary classes over there, I'm not going to say none of them have sinks, because there probably are some that do, but that don't, that do. And I see our elementary principal, I'm not going to ask her to speak, but I can see her shaking her head. Can we have school without sinks? Sure. Is that the way we want to go in the future? If we're making plans, that's up to y'all. The elementary over there, the cafeteria, has 2,300 square feet. Okay? If you've been in there, it's small. We get them all in there throughout the day. If you've ever gone to a music program where we put our risers up on there, if you notice, a lot of times on that stage, there's always, pretty much always, if they're not, they should be in the shower, there should be teachers standing along the edge of that thing, because it's dangerous, because it's just crowded. It's very crowded. It's a very small stage. It's about 300 square feet. Touching on the middle school is at 96% capacity. That's 434 students enrolled. At that campus, classrooms from new teachers are not available. Same scenario. In grades 4 and grades 5, if we had to add another teacher to one of those grades because our population is growing, then we would have to start scratching our head. There are some spaces over there we can make do with, and we will make do with, but long term, we're growing at the rate we're growing. We're going to have problems. Okay, so that's a challenge that we need to look at. And this is a little bit of nuance to the whole thing. Our idea, and we'll talk more about the idea that's being proposed in the bond referendum. The idea would be to move the 4th and 5th grade over to the elementary. They've been there before. All right, is it ideal? In a perfect world, I'd have a special place for every grade, every age. But as far as having school and doing what we need to do, there are schools all over the place that are pre-K 5 and sometimes pre-K 6. It's quite common, and that's the model. Not to compare ourselves with Forney, but if you go over to Forney, they're rolling out big old schools over there with multiple grades in them. They're probably having early childhood centers too in some places, but there's different variations of it, but all that costs money. Okay? Same thing, we don't have room. Okay. So here's some of the solutions that we considered. One of them was purchasing portable buildings. All right, we have a few portable buildings in the district. Matter of fact, there's two behind there's one long one, but it's 2 rooms at the elementary right now. I think one is used for music, and I forget what the other one's used for, maybe some group work or different things, but But basically, we have one long building that has two classroom spaces in it. That thing will go away eventually, or we may do what we did with one that was dilapidated and all messed up down at the middle school. We turned it into a carport. We put some of our white fleet under it, so we're, I heard somebody say, don't ever buy a portable, but if you have one, don't ever get rid of it. And so that's kind of the way we are about most things. Before we get rid of it, we're going to see if there's a way to make it last a little longer and be effective as long as it's safe. But portables were ruled out since they would be a short-term fix. Obviously, they're unsafe in some ways because they're detached and they're apart from the rest of the school. And then the other thing that a lot of folks may not understand is that if we're purchasing portables out of general fund because of referendum, we don't have any capital facility money because of bond. We don't have that money. The way we get that is do a bond referendum, and we're going to have to pay for that out of operations. And so what that means, that's money that we normally, I put it this way, when you pay your home mortgage, that's the bond referendum. When you go over into the operations budget, salaries, utilities, all those other things, that's kind of like the grocery money. So if you're having to use your grocery money to pay your house payment or pay off, it begins to be a problem. And so at some point, not saying we're there, but at some point, that's where we're going to be if we don't address through some sort of improvements to our facilities, and it's going to require the community to get involved. Okay, we considered, and this was actually my idea originally. I thought we put I checked with Rodney, and he ruled it out immediately when I said, Rodney, let's put a school right by your house. And I'm teasing a little bit, but we looked at putting a school right up there, but the cost to do that, to build a new school, even a elementary or middle school, maybe let the current elementary turn into an early childhood center, and split it off that way and move the 4th and 5th graders down. In the current climate that we're in, that would have cost us somewhere around $30 million, a little less, based on pricing and so forth that we're dealing with right now. And we'll talk about costs later on too, about where we are and things like that. But we were going in that direction, and actually our architect and our construction manager agent said, hey, we do this some places. Some schools choose this because it's a more economical way to go, and basically you get a like new school out of it. And actually, I worked in districts where we did that. And you can take a school, kind of like what we're talking about in our plan. You and I may know that school, at one time looked different, had a different appearance, or looked different on the inside. But it's amazing. You'd be amazed at what builders and architects can do with a space and renovated space, contrary to what you might think is less expensive. Now, depending on what you're renovating, but in school, I was asked that question a while back, and I was kind of scratching my head, right? Because I like to know, because you folks expect me to know, and I want to know. And so I checked in on that and talked to some different architects, and actually there's quite a bit of savings if you're able to renovate a space. And so, but we looked at building a new school. It would have it would put us in a bind with our INS tax rate. That's our home mortgage money, okay? By law, we're allowed if the voters choose to tax yourself, we can tax at a 50-cent rate, but once we get to that cap, we have to stop. Our neighbors over here in Crandall, they're waiting for bonds to go off, and they've passed other bonds, but they can't sell those bonds because they're at the cap, so they're having to wait. So we want to avoid, in my opinion, to be good stewards and realizing that right now, one of the things we love about this community is you look out there, it's green, it's ag in many cases. But the bad part about that, when you're going to raise funds, capital, it's not worth as much, because it's ag. You start putting houses, I know none of us want this, trust me. I don't want this, but when you start putting a bunch of houses on acreage, the value goes up, you generate more funds, you have an opportunity to raise more capital. That goes back to the solar. That gives us a little bit of a push there, regardless of how you feel about, green versus not green. The reality is that project's going to help us a little bit on value. We'll talk about that soon. So I believe that it's in our interest to preserve some of our INS cap space to pay for future facility needs. We considered using the combination of new construction and renovation. That's what we proposed, right? The idea has the least impact on the district other than portables, but we know that doing portables, we're going to really have any impact on the tax rate, but you know, we're dealing with portables, and we're dealing with what it does to the operation side. The tax impact for this project is projected to leave the district with 16 cents. So we're at 16 currently, paying for this facility, right? This was built in 2005. And so talking about the life of a mortgage and things, how long it lasts, you know, you can pay them off early, you can call part of it in, and actually our board has taken action recently to call some different notes that we have that will save us interest. Like one note they're calling is going to save us $700,000 over 15 years, and so it makes sense for the taxpayer. We get a better rate, and so we're constantly looking at our notes, just like you do with your house. You probably get phone calls, hey, we want to refinance your house. And so we watch, you know, we try to figure out, is that going to be good for us or not? And that we do the same thing at the school. But we need to preserve our pennies, in my opinion, because when those rooftops start hitting, maybe they won't, but it's very likely they will, based on what's going on in our world and around us. When those rooftops start hitting, we're probably going to have to do something else around here. I may be at the nursing home, you know, somebody send me a get well card or something and tell me about it, but I'm just saying, if we tie up all of our pennies because we had to have a new this or a new that when it wasn't necessary, because we can do it and create a very good product that's like new, that will last a long time, and that's what we're proposing. We save those pennies for something else. So that's what we're looking at there. But you know, that's up to the community to determine that. What this will do for us, by doing that project over there, what it does for us from pre-K all the way down the road to this, what we call the middle school, grade 8, it gives us a permanent fix to grow more students for, I don't know how long, I can't say how long. If we don't have crazy growth, it probably lasts you 5 or 10 years before you have to start looking at it again. If we start having the crazy growth that some communities had, I know some of you remember when Frisco was this size. I remember it. It's not now, but I mean, when you start getting that kind of growth, you take everything we're talking about tonight, you just kind of throw it in the trash and you got to start all over, right, at that point. But we're not there, and hopefully we won't be there for a while. But doing this plan, in my opinion, one man's opinion, will meet our needs and help us maintain being good stewards. So I may be redundant a few times here. So let's talk a little bit about the bond. I mentioned to you earlier, we're still paying on the high school, okay? And that number, I'm going to say 6.3, but for some reason that number doesn't, it may be slightly lower. I'll have to double check that. If I'm wrong, I'll fix it. It seems like, no, it is, because you've got to combine the 1.2. So if you take 6.3 from 1.2, that's 5.1. So we have 5.1 note on the high school, and we have a 1.2 note on the high school. That's how it's getting to 6.3. I was confusing myself there. So we have $6.3 million existing that we're making debt payments on. That causes us 16 cents of your money, based off of a $100 value. So if you had a $100,000 property, divided by 100, multiplied by the pennies, and that's pretty much how it comes out. And so if you look at, so the current bond referendum would call for an estimated 18 cents. I think it's estimated to be 17.7, but I'm a firm believer in don't overpromise you guys something. Do I think it might come in less? Might. Will it come in more? Could. But that's set, that tax rate is set every year. And the board determines what's the value, right? Everybody's property's been going up, right? Mine has. So all of our property values is going up. So there may be years where the rate doesn't have to be what it was before. But currently we're spending 16 cents of your tax money to pay for the bond, the high school. And it was the high school. I wish we could build, the elementary for what we built the high school for. That'd be a good deal. But the current bond referendum would add another 18 cents, so that pushes to 34. 50, the cap, minus 34, that's where we get the 16 cents that's not being utilized. It's out there, and hopefully, maybe we won't have to deal with it again. If you're 65 or older and you have the homestead exemption affidavit, then your tax rate's frozen, right? Not your property value. And to be clear, the district sets your tax rate. The district doesn't have anything to do with your property value. We're screaming and kicking just like you. The dirty little secret about the property values, and I'll share it with you. The legislature decides how much money they need. The comptroller decides what the properties need to be worth to generate what they need, and then they send that to the county appraiser. Okay? You know who sits on the board at the county, right? It's you guys. It's people like citizens. And so the dilemma, I'd hate to be a county tax appraiser board member because they're getting pressure from the comptroller. And I'll tell you what happens when they don't comply with that pressure in a minute. But they're getting pressure there, but they're getting pressure from their constituents that voted for them. Hey, don't raise my taxes, Hence we appeal and so forth and so on. But that's how that works. What happens, this happened here a few years ago, many of you may remember it. They got rid of the county tax appraiser. Y'all remember that? About 3 years ago or so? You know why they got rid of him? He wasn't getting, bottom line, he was not very efficient, didn't do a good job, just me, probably a great guy. The board over there, they had to do something because the state's value was doing this and the local values weren't coming up. So that gap that's created in there, it should be within 5%. If it gets bigger than that, about 3 years ago, we were at 85%. That automatically puts us in what they call a grace period. If that's not remedied within a couple, 2 or 3 years, then what starts happening to the school by the state, because we don't raise our values up enough at the appraisal district, the state starts taking that money out of the bowl, out of our bowl. Remember, we get our money two ways. For you guys, the 16 cents, and then whatever the rest of it is, 96 cents, whatever it is this year, added to that. But about pretty much, we get 78% of our funds to run the district from the state. So if the property appraisals aren't where they need to be, they hold some of that. So it's really kind of like putting the frog in the pot and then turning the hot water on, or turning the heat on. We can't win. You can't win. So I don't know. That's probably another voting issue, for another time. But a lot of folks don't know that. So if we get 78% of our funds from the state, then we're getting what's the rest of it? 22. Then that's coming from the monies that we raise. Remember a few years ago, the community agreed to pass a TRE, and what that did for us that year is because you guys agreed to raise your tax rate by 8 cents. We generated we were getting about $200,000 from you guys, but what we ended up getting from the state was an additional $750,000. Had we not raised our tax rate, that would have been left on the table, and you folks were gracious enough to realize that, and you saw that and you said, well, yeah, we need to do that. That's when we really were able to start giving teacher raises at that time. And knock on wood, we're not where some folks are, but we've been able to increase teacher salaries because of it. Now, if we could just figure out how to keep the health insurance down, so that at the end you end up betting and you're really not gaining a whole lot of ground. I hope I'm not. I was going to say earlier, I want to be brief, but I'm going to take as long as I need to. And I know the Cowboys are playing and something, but I've got my DVR on. I'm not sure I want to watch them anyway. But so let's talk about the solar project a minute. The solar farm, again, like it or not like it, doesn't matter how you feel about it. It's here, and it should have a favorable effect on our tax rate. So when we were projecting what it would cost you guys if we pass a bond, we projected that we would be able to assess about 25% of the value of the solar farm. Okay, the way they set it up in the tax limitation, it's kind of like when you buy a car. If you buy a new car and you pay whatever you pay, and you drive it off the lot and you come back in 3 days and try to take it back, they're not going to give you what you paid for it because they're going to depreciate it. They're going to continue to depreciate it year after year. Unless the market we're in right now, I think you get more money for a used car than you can a new one in some cases. But in a normal setting, that's what you get. The solar farm, solar battery project, I always struggle to think how I should say it, it's going to depreciate for 10 years. So the first year is predicted to be about 145 million. Again, we're only saying about 25% in our projections because we don't want to overpromise. But that's about 37,000. I think I wrote that in there. 37 million. And I apologize if I'm saying thousand. We're talking about million. So to put that in perspective, what that does for our tax base on the debt side, okay? If we took two tables and we said that represents 150 million and that represents 150 million, we split them up together, that's the total property value for the school district. So for the first year, and it'll start depreciating every year, certainly for the first 5 years, it's projected that we're going to be able to push an entire another table over here, and now we're going to bounce those debt pennies off of that. So a penny off of 300 million versus a penny off of 400 million, your penny's worth more. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how that works. Do we know? No, we don't know what it's going to be. The assessments take place on that just like they do on your place, and then they'll kick in 2022. But it could help us. Okay? It's helping us now in the projection for the 18 cents that we're proposing in this project that it would cost you. But if the value, if we get more than 25% of the assessed value, then obviously it'll be less than 18 cents. It has to come from you guys because it's coming from down the road. And I'm not going to talk about the M&O rate. That's a whole other situation. So the bond projects, right? This is out there. By the way, this is a rendering of what it might look like. Okay, we do not have plans for that school yet. Matter of fact, you've seen what we have. We have a draft diagram, and the way it works with bonds and construction and things of that nature, you try to decide through your committees, planning, what you need. You try to determine what cost estimates are based on prior construction in the area that you're in, what it is now, and you try to project what it's going to be if the bond passes. So that's where we are. But as far as plans and all that, we don't have any of that. If the bond were to pass, then that's when we would do that. We could have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars and had plans drawn up, but if we don't have the capital in place to follow through, that, in my opinion, would be a waste of your money. So that's where we are on that. But I talked to you earlier about what we would be doing. We'd be adding classrooms. We're going to have to add a storm shelter because the laws have changed. When you do build a school now, you have to have a storm shelter. What will that look like? It may look like, it's very likely it will be classrooms, right? They'll serve as classrooms, but in the event there's a storm or tornado watch, we'll be able to take all of those kiddos at that school and put them in that room. And it's built by standards that will withstand, in our case, probably a tornado, right? And so that's how that works, but that's a requirement. What we would do then is we would also renovate those classrooms that are there now to try to make them more spacious, because some of them are really, really small. We would expand the cafeteria. Remember I said it's 2,300 square feet. We're thinking over 5,000. would put us in a good place. You know, we haven't emphasized this very much, but if you drop kids off and pick them up at that elementary, you know, sometimes it can be very convoluted getting in and out of there. And so this project would help us alleviate some of that. And then, you know, new playground, whoop-de-doo. Well, it's whoop-de-doo for the kids. They'll appreciate it, but obviously there'll be a building, you know, if everything goes like we're talking about sitting there. So that's the bond project. The tax impact, I've talked about that a little bit. I'll just go down to the chart. So there's probably very few properties in Scurry-Rosser that are valued at $100,000, right? More like, I think the average, I was looking the other day, the average is like slightly over 200, but I'm sure a lot of you folks, your properties are worth way more than that. In today's value, probably a lot more than that. Pardon me. So you can see the impact. You know, in my mind, $11 a month doesn't sound bad. $40 a month, that's sounding a little bit worse, but nearly $500 a year, that's a lot of money. So we realize we're asking you to spend your money, and you'll have to determine if that's what you think is best. Obviously, it's for our kids, but I'm not going to get into that thing because I know you're all for kids. Okay? Price of steel has gone up, and I'm not going to try to talk that kind of talk. I will talk about cost. I can talk about it, but there are a lot of you folks in here know way more about me, about this kind of stuff than I do. I know how to run a school, all right? Some days I know how to talk. Then there are days like today. I'm not as good a talker, but the price of steel has gone up, and you can see it's up around $1,800 in July. I'm hearing that some costs are coming down. I know lumber has come down a little bit. I don't really know for sure where steel is. But our estimates, when we estimated our costs back in the summer, because there's a process you have to go through to get this to move forward to where we are now, we were basing it on costs and trying to predict what those costs would be next year. Okay? Once again, if the bond referendum has to pass, then you go out and you do your bids and so forth and so on, and then you're able to solidify what your final costs are going to be. A little fancy little line there I put. So what happens, you know, the costs go down, then the price to build the school would be less. To do what we want to do, it would be less. Okay? I guess in theory it could be more, but again, when we were trying to determine cost and what to come and ask you for, we were considering what's it like now? What's it going to be like next year? We didn't want to come in here and tell you, oh, we can do this for this amount, and then we end up being short of money and we can't finish our school. So that, and I'll talk a little bit about that process, but basically bonds are sold, then the designs are completed, there's a bidding process that goes on, then the construction, and that depends, obviously we would build the new, right? We'd move those kids around in that building at that point, and then we'd go back into the other end and start doing some renovations, and eventually, so it wouldn't be an immediate, you know, we open it up and all the pre-K 5 are down there. There would have to be some, because there's going to have to be school going on in part of this time, because if you look, it says construction last 12 months. And the standards we're dealing with now, you guys know how hard it is to get some things. There's a time when you couldn't get concrete. There may be a time when you can't get steel, I don't know. But there's lots of issues. So, you know, I'll just tell you, those timelines are very, very fuzzy. But in theory, August 2023. So we're sitting here now, we're thinking, okay, we're full, we're growing, it's going to be 2023 before we can, you know, and we may not have any more kids coming, but it could get out of hand real quick. So that's why we're coming to you now. Okay? So in review, and I'm going to look at this, you know, this project will provide permanent classroom space in a light new school. And I've worked in many light new schools, and I'm telling you, they're a new school. And they should last for many years. This project will impact both the elementary and the middle school, all the way up through 8th grade. It'll have the least impact, other than portables, on our tax rate and on our ability to raise capital in the future. I mentioned that last one, to preserve our INS cap rate. Okay, I'm getting very near the end of this. So, as a reminder, all of this on our webpage. It's probably on Coffman County, election site. And it does say down there at the bottom, votetexas.gov. You can go and register to vote. All right. We have on our webpage. You look up there on that ribbon across the top. The third little wording from the right, coming this way, it says Bond 2021. You can go there and you can find things that you can go back to and look at again and again. This will end up being there. There are some things that we're able to get out on social media. There are some things that either we hadn't figured out how to do it, or it doesn't G and haul, and so not everything goes out there, but we at least try to blast out and announce to you, hey, there's something, go see it. And so that's what we've been doing, but you can go there and see those things. So when you came in, you were asked to complete some cards. If you've thought of something now and you want to ask a question, we want you to ask. The reason you said, why do we have to put our name? You don't have to. But if I see someone and I can identify who they are, I will contact you myself and I'll try to help you make sure you know the facts. That's all. And to be very clear, I cannot advocate for or against. That is illegal. And by the way, there's one little vicious rumor out there that somehow I'm on the take. Oh, let me tell you this. If you think I'm on the take, and you think I would do that I would jeopardize my livelihood and or my freedom for this project or any other project, you don't know me. But two, if you think that, we got an investigator right over here, and you need to get with him today because it's just not true. And I don't know where it came from. Don't ask. I don't want to know, but that offends me. But I am guilty of being for this school and for your kids and for having quality school. And I know it doesn't mean that you're for or against this. I'm not saying if you're for it, you're good. If you're against it, you're not. You know what I feel really good about right now as a superintendent? You guys have got it on your plate. And you're aware now. You're aware now. So, we know that you'll do what you think is best, whatever that may be. And if this proposal doesn't work, we'll keep having school. We'll meet again. We'll talk to folks again. We'll figure it out. But we'll be coming back to you, I'm sure, because we're going to have to do something. I wish it wasn't that way. Question. So maybe hand me a couple of them while y'all. I may have answered some of them. Okay, here's one about the pre-K lunches and PE in the same cafeteria and gym. So, when those have to be managed by Ms. Shirey, that's a programmatic process, okay? We'd love for everybody to eat at 12 o'clock or 11:30 or 12:30 or whatever. But we make sure all the kids eat, and we try to serve them in a timely manner that they all get to eat. Having a larger cafeteria would help us. Obviously, we'd have more students. So, but I'll give you an example. Right now at the middle school, I go over there a lot because my office is on that campus, and I'll go in there. I eat the lunches over there about 2 or 3 times a week, and I love it because I get to go and kind of see the children and I like the lunches and I like the price, but I do have to pay for my lunch, by the way. Your children get it free this year. So I saw one child today, he was eating what he brought from home, and he told me, and I was talking to him, I said, you get free lunch? He goes, yes sir, I'm fixing to go get it. So he was gonna, and I remember those days. But right now they are functioning at the middle school, for example, I don't know how the elementary is. I know it's crowded in there. So I was over there a week or so ago, and it's so small to begin with. But I was over here, and I noticed that there was a whole half of that cafeteria that wouldn't be in use. And I was talking to some of the staff, and they're still sort of functioning in that COVID time. They're trying to be careful, and so they just left it like it was. But obviously, if you put more kids in there, we have several lunches at the middle school. We could have less, and if your child eating that early lunch, they could change it. They probably will at some time, but I'm not going to fuss with those leadership over there about trying to keep the kids safe. So that's that question. I hope I answered it. How many additional seats will be available at the elementary school after 4 and 5 move in? I'll have that. That's on our website. We have a FAQ and it's in there. And some folks get Alzheimer's. I have sometimes. Okay, and it tends to get worse as the day wears on. I'll describe it this way. It'll be at least one section of students for each grade. So we would add an additional pre-K room. So we'd go from 3 to 4 sections. All the other grades would go from 4 to 5, as far as space is concerned. And so if you say pre-K 1, 2, 3, that's 6 times whatever that is, So it's you can figure it out. But it's on our website. It will give us room for a lot more students. You say, well, we need more room than that. All we got to do is spend more money. That's all we have to do. But this will meet our needs for growth for a while. Okay, here's another one. Is there a backup plan if the bond doesn't pass? What is that plan? So the process for getting to where we came to involves groups of people, right? And so if this plan does not work, then we have to go back to that process. We don't have a plan. Now, on November 3rd, what's our plan? November 4th, November 5th, after the election this year, we're going to have school. If a class gets too small, we're going to scratch our head and try to, a room, we have to have another room. We'll figure out something. That's what we do. But, we don't have plan A, B, C, D there. We have a plan right there. And it's not that easy for us because we have to engage the community through our committee process. Look at that. What it says. I can see it. I just can't. Oh, who sets the property value? I think I answered that earlier, but the appraisal district, right? They send out appraisers. The comptroller. The comptroller. So I'll go back through that. The way my property was assessed and evaluated. Okay, someone from the county appraisal district came out and they looked to see, do I have any new construction, whatever, how many square feet do I have, all that, lot lines, rooftop lines, and a lot of that stuff they do off of their software. They never come to your house, right? And from that they determine what it is. But remember, they have values that are coming to them from somewhere else, kind of the top-down type thing. And I am not an expert in this area that I'm trying to address for you right now. But we don't set your property value. Well, I say we, the school. We set your tax rate at a level that will pay for our bond payments, our debt payments. Okay? That's what the district does. And that's why, if you're in theory, if your taxes are too high, you don't like your tax rate, then that's something you can address with us. But your tax rate hadn't really changed as far as INS in a while. All right, so here's one. So will the new storm shelter be for all kids or only a new part of the building? So it will be built big enough for every child, staff member that's in there. Obviously, they won't be, you know, playing mumbling peg or anything. They'll be packed in there. If we ask for 20 million, we only use 17 million. Where do those funds be used for? So that's a great question. So what happens, you know, if it costs us less? So then those monies are set right there. Those monies, if the bond passes, those monies have to be spent on what we said we were going to spend it on. Very clear what we said we were going to spend it on, right? Now the general election material says it's for facilities and so forth and so on. But I promise you, it's outlined in board policy, it's outlined in state law. We have to come back to you guys. We have to say, hey, we got this money, that's done. You know, we feel like that project's done, but we still have money in reserves. You have to write it down, Rodney. Write it on a card. So if that money's still in reserve, then we'd have to come back and there'd have to be a voting process. You have to be aware of that. We can't just all of a sudden spend it on something else. Okay? Have we considered rearrangement of school buildings? Yes. 4 through 6 will be at the current elementary school, and the intermediate will be the new high school. Yes, we have considered that. I've had people talk to me about that. We considered everything. There are glitches in that idea. I know there's proponents of that idea, but there are some glitches in that idea, and I would have to think on that one. And I'll go back through these, and if you've got a contact here, I'll reach out to you and talk to you about that. I need to kind of wrap my brain back around that concept again because I've moved on from that. Could you explain the INS tax rate at 50 cents for new school versus like new at a lower rate? I feel like I answered that, but I can go back over it again. Some of these I think you wrote down and then I maybe answered in the presentation. So if you ask that question and you still are struggling with it, I'll be happy to talk about it, but I'm going to save everybody else's time. Y'all waggle your head if you think, no, you hadn't covered that. I covered that, right? Okay. I'm trying to be mindful of everybody's time. How many companies were asked to bid this edition? None. There has been no bids. Bond passes, bonds are sold, bids go out. That's how it works in school referendums and school bond.
And how do you know that it's going to cost $20 million?
So the board has selected Powell Leon to be the attorney to handle legal documents in relation to facility projects. The board has selected Goodwin Laster Strong to be the architects for facility construction projects. And the board has selected Gallagher Construction as the construction manager agent for facility projects. That is what it is. Okay, it has nothing to do with this job, value. That is what's been established. Now, can that change? Anything can change. Just require same thing if there's money left over, you go back to the process. You go back to the board. You know, nothing. I guess nothing is forever type thing. So that's how that process works.
When you say board, you're talking about the previous board or this board?
Here's what I'm going to say, y'all. I'm okay with you guys asking questions from the floor. One of the reasons that I don't want to do that is I don't want to get somebody over here upset with somebody over there. I'm not worried about me because I know you can come talk to me, but I think I heard who is the board?
Yeah.
So the board ultimately makes decisions about votes, but there's committees. I'm trying to answer your question.
What board was it, this year's or last year's or?
Say it again.
Is it the current board members or was it past board members?
The bond referendum was voted on by this current school district, this current board. The recommendations that we are functioning under now in our collaborative visioning plan is on our website. And until we revisit it or we make changes to it, we update it. Some of the things in that program, we have checked those boxes. We've accomplished them. Sir?
He asked what board made those recommendations. The answer was in 2019.
November of 2000, and you're talking about the contractors and so forth? That's in 2019. Yeah, it was the board serving in 2019. And that's in public record. Some of them are serving now, some of them obviously are not. Good question. Okay? I think I answered that one, but I'll contact that person. I think I've already answered. I'm not, I'll try to answer every question, but. We talked about building an intermediate school, why we did not feel like that was the best solution cost-wise. I told you that was my original thought, but we feel like in the current climate it may be cost prohibitive. You may not. You may feel differently, and certainly that's up to you guys. When was the meeting announced? A couple weeks ago, I guess. Yeah. Whenever we posted on our website. What's the length of the bond? I believe it would be 20, 30, yeah, 30. Probably get refinanced 2 or 3 times during that time period if rates were favorable. I'll give you an example about life of school. People talk about the life of a school. I did not know this. Some of you may know that what's called the administration building now, that was like one of the main campuses years and years ago. That school was built in 1963, and it's still serving a purpose. For the most part, schools pretty much last forever. At some point, I'm sure some of those things, but that's a good building in many respects. This bond will not be used to pay off any current debt. We really don't have a lot of debt. We have about, what did I say, 6.3 million. But the design of this project, the plan for this project is to have enough money to do this project. If there's money left over, then that'll have to, you can use, if you acquire capital funds and the project comes in less and you have it sitting there, you can, if the community agrees, you can use that money to retire debt, existing debt or that debt. So and to answer your question, you can do that. But and sometimes folks do that. So itemized budget, we don't have any of that right now. I addressed that. There will be one of those at some point. There'll be a committee. I'm sure some of you folks would probably serve on that committee if you have a liking to. How many out of districts do we have? We have about 50 teacher or employee children who go to school here that don't live here. We have about the same amount who are kids that came here years ago or whatever. So in the early 2000s, this school district decided they were going to accept transfers. Okay, and so they came. When I came in 2016, 2017, I forget exactly when the light bulb came on in my head, I realized we're getting crowded. And so if you look at our enrollment over those years, we kept it at about 1,100, but the way it stayed at 1,100, kids graduate in a class, some of them are transfer students. We haven't been adding any students on the bottom end, So like at the elementary, I think there's like 5 or 6 kids, and I think all but one are employees. There's one that slipped through the crack, and that's something I'm having to deal with right now. Once a transfer is granted, it has to be allowed for a year. I've actually gone toe to toe with TDA over that at previous times in my life, but unless somebody's doing something egregious and they violate, the terms of the transfer agreement. But this year's senior class has about 3. The junior class has quite a few, like double digit, like I don't know, between 10 and 15. I want to be careful not to say a precise number because then I might be wrong. But I'm pretty sure it's like less than 15. But it's a lot. That would be considered a class with a big group of transfers. But in the grades that we're having to struggle with about space, it's not transfers. Okay, the transfers are on the big end of the school. They're not on the little end, the lower grades of the school right now. And those will roll off. In a desperate mode, if we were just desperate, then we wouldn't grant those existing transfers. But some of those kids have gone here their whole life. They're like a sophomore, let's say. We're reluctant to say you can't come back when we have room for them here. We don't necessarily have room for them at the elementary. Okay. Good questions. So if somebody transfers here and they're an employee's child, there's no cost for them to come. You say, well, why don't we charge them? We charge others, I think, $250. That was set years ago, but think of it this way. You think, well, we ought to get more money for them. To go to this school, it costs this or that. We get whatever the state, we get the AD money for that child. So if a child comes here from Crandall and they're not an employee's child, or if they are an employee's child, but they live somewhere else, well, the money that would go to that district where they live comes to us. That can range anywhere from, say, $6,800 to probably $8,000. It depends on what all their needs are, right? In funding, there's different factors that are used. For example, a child that you and I would consider to be very needy in the delivery of instruction. I'm being careful how I say that. They're going to be weighted differently than a kid that has all his faculties and can walk and do normal things. So, but we get the money from that child attending here. The 250, that's kind of like you put some skin in the game if you really want to be here. But again, we didn't set that. There's a decision process for setting that differently if we want to. But what you need to understand is it doesn't matter. We're not allowing transfers unless they're employee children. Okay, that is actually a carrot for us because we'll get down to say 2 or 3 teachers that we want to hire for a course, and they'll come here, make a little bit less money because their kid can go to school here, and we get a better teacher that way. So it works to our advantage. That's why we do it. Getting closer to the end, folks. Thank you for your patience. Who else is fast growth? Crandall is like 15%. They're growing at a 15% clip. Kaufman's growing at a 2% clip. Kemp, and this was in the 2021 listing. Kemp was 0. Forney, and I use Forney because they're Kaufman County. I kind of look at the county schools. I know Forney's a whole different animal, but I think they're more than Crandall. They're less than 20%, but that's the growth rates. When we had a demographer look at our growth prior to kind of what's been going on, they predicted about a 3 to 5% growth rate. But right now we're growing faster than that. There is one thing that's out there, and I'll go ahead and talk about it. Some of you heard about it. So when they had the hurricanes down in southeast Texas, a lot of children were displaced. Remember that? They couldn't go to school. Let's say they live in Galveston. They couldn't go to school, but they could go live in Fort Worth with their uncle or their aunt or their grandpa. Well, then as long as the parent or the person living in that school district would sign a notarized document and say, this child living with me, and there's a reason for it. They're living there with him because they're displaced. The whole idea of homeless, so it rolls into that section. then they can do that. Okay, children who live, let's say in Mesquite, but during the week they stay with grandma in Scurry, there is a clause in there in the law and policy different from the affidavit that allows that child to stay with grandma during the week, even though they don't live there, permanently. The phenomena that we're dealing with here, and I'll be quite honest with you, it was kind of a new phenomenon. COVID was a new phenomenon, right? We had to learn to deal with it. The affidavits, that's something that we didn't have before the hurricanes hit down there. And so, our system is not set up, this year we start looking at our system because we're hearing, hey, we got people that they're fudging on the affidavits, so they come to school here. Some of them live across the street in Kemp, and we probably exited half a dozen that we found out they're fudging. I mean, if somebody has a legitimate need, we're going to follow the law, we're going to follow the policy. But we will knock on the door, and we have, and we do home visits. And we're trying to ensure that we're going to take care of our kids, right? We're going to bust our tails, try to take care of our kids. But if a student has a place to go to school, that's where they need to go to school because it's just the way it is. So, how many years of tax abatement for the solar? It's 10 years. Okay, it's 10 years, but it depreciates. On the debt side, we get full value the first year. Let's say it's 145 million. Okay, it's probably, they're projecting slightly higher than that, but who knows? The next year it's probably 142 million. And it goes down like that to about year 5, and then I was looking at about year 6, it drops under 100 million. So it decreases until you get to the 10th year. After the 10th year, the 11th year, it goes back to full value. Hence the abatement, the incentive for them, that they get. Here's where they really save money. On what we call the operations side, the M&O, it's capped at 40 million every year for 10 years. So if you think about it, 16 cents on the debt side, they have to pay it, but it's depreciating amount. On the M&O side, what's 145 minus 40? So they're saving upwards of $100 million a year straight for 10 years. So that's the incentive. And, our legislature created that situation. Yes, sir.
That's my question. Now, the second question too that you just brought up.
Okay.
What maintenance and operations leverage on Schneider do?
Say one more
What does Schneider in maintenance and operations leverage?
Yes, sir. So we have okay, you got your home mortgage side, right? We're talking about spending operations money. Can y'all hear me?
No.
Got a lot of wind around here. Out here? Okay, good. I'm sorry. All right, good. So, I usually got my coaching voice anyway most time, but raise your hand when I'm talking too loud. The maintenance tax, okay? So, debt can be funded different ways. Capital funds, bond, community. A maintenance tax note or a time warrant, there's some other huge. Yeah, it's basically a maintenance operation loan that you pay it out of your maintenance and operation. We spent $900,000 on that football field. That was part of a $5.3 billion thing that you guys may remember that. We did a lot of different things. Remember these secure injuries that we had? We did that on the campus project. We did a lot of HVAC at our campuses. It's a way to fund or pay off big maintenance and operation type things that you couldn't do normally. And there are restrictions. You can do some things through home mortgage money, finance. You can spend some of that money on things that would be considered infrastructure, maybe like air conditioning or HVAC. There's some things you can't spend it.
So what I was getting at that, so every possible taxation method that you have will be leveraged out for the most part. If this bond passes.
No.
down to 16 cents.
Well, and then of course we have our operations side, but we're actually in the process of saving of that equation, going from 5.2, we've gone down to 4.3. We're fixing to take advantage of some savings there in the next month or two, or whenever it goes out. When that goes out, we will take advantage of that. We'll save money and interest the same way you do with finance. But to being very clear and truthful as I have to be, you're right to a degree. I'll split hairs with you on, not saying I'm right.
I'm not arguing, I'm not arguing, I just,
Yeah.
it's already, we've seen it happen once, here we go again, it's the nature of the beast. I understand that.
Yes, sir.
What do you anticipate getting off that $6 million that's already out there?
We have there's one note that's 1.2, Brian, and that's coming up for, it's what they call, it's called callable. I think it's callable next August, and I would think that 1.2, not that August, then that 5.3, whatever I said earlier it was, and that's not callable, I think, 1.6, and not all of it's callable. So at different times, the way it works, it's not always all of it's callable. Some of it is. What callable means is the owners of the bond, they're willing to let you out of it. So you're saying that interest, I guess that's how it works. And I'm in an area that, I can talk myself into the corner real quick, because that's not what I do for a living. That's my understanding of church.
Where you want to use the value of the value, and their value, their relative to the else.
So by law, we don't have a choice. Using appraisal and that, we don't get to pick. Yeah, we're trying to do this for posterity, so thank you. Yeah, and I'll try not to echo too bad. So we don't have to say in this. It is the call. It's good. Good stuff. Probably got some more cards up there. I can see it now. Lights on. So does the bond determine if employees continue to receive bonuses? Probably not. If I had to say, no, it won't. Could it? Theoretically? If we can't fund, if we need classrooms and we can't, we don't have a way to get them at some point, if you live that way for too long, eventually you're going to spend yourself in a problem. But in theory, to say no, never, in theory, you can't say that. I remember in 2008, we were letting people go. I wasn't here then, but I heard we had let people go then. It depends. There was one year where the state was doing what they call proration. So let's say you're supposed to get $100 million from the state. We wouldn't get that much. Let's say $8 million from the state. Well, they only sent you $7.5 million. So 80% of our money on the operations side goes for our people. Okay? Goes for our people. So to be truthful, it'd be hard for me to stand up here and say, no, nobody's going to get. And the word was bonuses, okay? A bonus, we don't do bonuses, we do retention incentives. I know what you mean when you say bonuses, like, years ago people get a ham at Christmas, right? That was now it's kind of like money. This district has been able to give retention incentives at Christmas since I've been here. The year before I came, I think they gave maybe a $1,300 one or something like that. And then we went down to, say, 500 or so. But the last, don't want to exaggerate, but I think probably the last 3 years, including this year, and that's a decision we make at budget time. We talk to the board about it. And I'll say this about our board. All the board members that we've ever had since I've been serving here, they're always wanting us to take care of the teachers. And I tell our staff this, they probably heard me say this a million times. you know, I can write you a thank you note, I can say all kinds of things about you, but the best way I can show, you know, that we love you, that we care about you in the district is put money in your pocket. So I try to scrimp and save where I can, not as long as it's working and it's safe and it's, you know, not giving us a bad name. Then we're going to try to save money, because I know that leaves more money to share with our people. So we try to do that. We're not always perfect.
So, can I ask you something on that one? That's my question.
Yes, sir.
Have you ever said anything along those lines to staff about wanting to go in order to continue to get your incentives?
I talked to my staff about this. I talked to my staff about what they can do and what they can't do as an employee, just like me. Except my roles are more extreme. I have talked to them about the ramifications if a referendum doesn't pass, what it does to our ability to pay staff in the future. Absolutely, I did. And I would do it again.
But not to tell them to push the monster. The thing to push.
I can't tell the staff. That's illegal. Yeah, no, I try to give people facts, just like I'm giving y'all facts. I'm telling you, that is a possibility. How big a possibility? I don't know. Depends on what happens with our funds. From unforeseen things that are out of our control. But it could. It could happen, sure. But it probably won't. And it'll be one of the last things that we would ever do here. And I think I probably told that to our staff too. How will you put 30 classes in the new elementary? What do you do for people living in the district that don't look at the website? Do something with the website. I tell you what, if you are someone that needs information, you don't feel like you have access to it, if you'll see me, I'll bring it to your house. I don't know. I mean, most folks use their web or their phone or their Facebook or whatever, but there may be some that you're not getting information about this, and you want it or you need it. And I certainly hope you don't feel like we're not trying to get you information. We do want you. We do want you to get information.
What about the other question, though, that I asked? You're proposing 5 teachers per grade level, which is kind of pre-K, 33 classes, in a building that doesn't have 33 rooms, even when you add on. So if you're talking about the growth, we're already projected to overgrow it before we even get started. So we're spending $20 million for nothing, because we're eventually going to have to add on. Why don't we spend the money we need to give the kids what they need and build for the future instead of more right now?
And so, one, you don't know how many classrooms we're going to put in there.
Well, you projected 5 per grade level.
Yeah,
Well, those were your numbers, I used.
Yeah.
But the proposal that you put out on the internet does not have 33 rooms, therefore your numbers.
So about this the draft sketch.
Right, they do not match. So we don't know what we're voting for.
Yeah, well, to try to help you to know what you're voting for, disregard the sketch. Hear my words. Believe it, don't believe it, that's up to you. But I'm telling you that the plan is to add a classroom for every one of those grades, to have that ability, either at that campus and or this campus for pre-K up through grade 8.
Not the true cost of construction, the construction that's all time.
We have as good, we're able to predict costs as good as any other school district can at this time. You know, you're trying to predict. And when the value of things that you build with are going like this, and you don't know, people are saying it's going there, it's not. But you know, that, I wish I could give you a more informative answer than that, but I'd probably be lying if I did. Okay. So, yeah, we're not buying any land, y'all. That was a template that was grabbed and it was a bond template. It was from another deal, so we took that off. We have the land. All right, this is about to go off, so we'll, I'm not saying we won't keep going, we certainly can. Yes, the LPC.